Hi, folks. How are you all going? Must have heard the news about Trump, EU leaders, and Zelensky's meeting today. Good news? Or was it? Now, Trump was able to convince EU leaders with his proposal about Ukraine and Russia. The EU leaders and Zelensky, they all say it was beyond their expectations. So, something will come out of it, a good for the world peace. It seems that the discussion between Trump and Putin at Alaska was very good, although skeptics had a very bad note on it or skepticism on it. The thing is that Putin was able to explain in a systematically orderly way to Trump, and Trump was open minded about the root cause, the issues that had created Ukraine Russia conflict. I'm sure that Putin must have brought the ABM treaty signed by Gorbachev and Reagan for the anti ballistic missiles. This ABM treaty was signed so as to mitigate an unfortunate happening, a misunderstanding which can start the nuclear war. But the time changed, and so was the administration in US. In 2002, Bush the Jr. withdrew from this treaty without any serious thoughts of the world peace. This created a problem. The problem was imperialistic attitude of US administration from Bush Jr.'s time on onwards. The treaty was withdrawn because at the same time what was happening that East Europe, which was part of Russia, became independent countries, and NATO wanted to expand, and the US war industry felt there was a good scope of making good money. The NATO started expanding, went to all Eastern European countries and convinced them to join NATO. This NATO membership gave the authority to NATO to put nuclear missiles on Russian borders. Why? The question of why was not understood, and Putin must have explained Russia has never been on expansion. Russia invaded only one country in these last 30, 40 years, which was Kabul. Afghanistan and had to withdraw. In that time, US had gone in 20, 30 countries, physically invaded or put its boots there. So what was the reason for putting nuclear missiles on Russian border? That was the question. That was the root cause. Russia was saying, please don't do it, don't expand, because there was an agreement by which NATO was not to expand to the east at all, 1 inch. Then Ukraine comes in picture in later 2010s, when the elected president of Ukraine was disposed by a coup with influence and interference of USA. Then later on, Ukraine applied to become EU member, which was flatly refused because of very many issues within Ukraine, from democracy to genocide type of actions in its own country. Eastern Ukraine is basically the Donbass area, is basically heavily populated by Russian population, and Zelensky was instrumental to put them down. Atrocities were beyond limit. And Russia had been saying, don't do it. Finally, Russia started helping the rebels so that nobody comes to Russia. NATO don't expand. Now, once EU membership was refused to Ukraine, Zelensky did another step, applied to the NATO. Now, the moment this news came out, Russia told all EU countries, please don't do it. Don't do it. We can't accept it because it is our security. Since if Ukraine became part of NATO, then NATO will put its missiles there, nuclear missiles, which was a threat to Russia. In the end, in 2022, there was no option left, and Russia invaded. The conflict went on. It's going on. These all the things would have been explained to Trump in a different way than a normal Western media or the countries had been propagating. Fortunately, this is the only and the first time when Trump came up with open mind and understood the problem. Surely it has not been said, but they both came to understand, that is Putin and Trump, that nothing can be achieved without talking to others now. Since Trump understood the situation and the problem and the issues, the root cause, as Putin had been saying for a long time. If you remember my last video, you'll remember that I mentioned that the peace between Ukraine and Russia impacting the whole Europe, then as well as world peace, was dependent on two things, non-negotiable. First, no NATO membership to Ukraine, and second, Crimea remains with Russia being a strategic issue of security. So when after the Alaskan meeting was over, Trump immediately asked Zelensky and EU leaders to come and meet because he has got a proposal. Before the arrival of these people, EU leaders and Zelensky, Trump made it very clear that there are two non-negotiable things. One is no NATO membership to Ukraine, and second thing, Crimea remaining same as it is with Russia. And the security issue for Ukraine shall be considered. Very good. This is the first time Trump had been very, very clear in understanding the issues and coming to a point to resolve. Well, they had a meeting yesterday. Today, EU membership and Zelensky came to White House. The proposal was put in front of them, which has not been detailed in the media, by Trump. The proposal was so good that EU members were happy. Actually, EU member leaders came there to support Zelensky, so he should not agree to something under pressure by Trump that can have some kind of constraints or an impact on EU nations. So this bunch of pack found the proposal put by Trump was very good. In their own words, it was beyond their expectation. Now, the details have to be worked out. The problem here is it can be derailed. The proposal can be derailed, not by Russia, but by European nations, the EU leaders, for their own benefits, constraints, and national issues, which may give them some disadvantage by Ukraine and Russia joining together, being no conflict issues. What I mentioned in my last video was the strategy for peace was this. First, non-constraints, no NATO membership to Ukraine, and Crimea remaining in Russia. Then, two, the eastern Ukraine, specifically the Donbass area, becomes an autonomous state within Ukraine. This will reduce the atrocities committed by Zelensky's period and before to the Russian ethnic, because they have got a very big population. Second, elections are called and an autonomous government is elected. While Russian forces are still there. So nothing untoward happens to the ethnic population, which happened in Zelensky's period specifically. Third was Russia must remove all its forces within 18 months after so that elections can be held. Now, how the elections are held, obviously, international people will come in and they'll supervise it and all that will happen. I think similar kind of proposal was put forward by Trump, because this creates a win-win situation, although there's a bit of compromise there about Crimea. So the proposal is there. Now, all we have to worry is about derailment. The Western leaders and skeptics are saying, will Russia honor? It is not the question, will Russia honor? The question is, will EU have some sense in their head? Because this war or this conflict is not going to help them. If this war really expands, if they keep on supporting with such arms and ammunitions that will hurt Russian population, Russia will have to do something to stop the arms ammunition coming to their countries. Maybe put missiles in other countries too, from where the weapons are being transported or coming. So let's hope something good comes up. And people should appreciate, I'm not a Trump fan at all, but Trump has done something good here. Has looked into the issue thoroughly without prejudice. If this all goes well, then what is next? If the proposal becomes an agreement, what comes next? Is removal of constraints on Russia, an open trade, or some kind of a better trade practices between US and America and Russia. Both countries will benefit, and so will the world. So folks, think about it. Let's see what happens. I'll come back in a couple of weeks and we'll talk about it again. Thanks for listening. Leave your opinions. Ciao.